Great. So the first thing that I wanted to say was thank you very much for being with us today. I appreciate that schools at the moment are places of real kind of uncertainty, real stretch and real challenge. And I can imagine that all of you have had incredibly busy days, weeks, months up to this point. And the first thing that I wanted to say was that we really appreciate your continued focus and commitment with regards to YPI. That is really, really sincerely valued, and so is your time today and being part of this webinar. So we started this webinar series at the beginning of the academic year, recognising that we would likely need to provide each and every one of you with as much possible support as we could. And so therefore we have extended into the webinar space, which a lot of people have. Some of you may have been part of some of our previous webinars. I know I can see some familiar faces and others haven't been. The specific focus of the webinar today is around looking at how YPI can be delivered in an online space. Now, I wanted to start with a couple of protocols. So we'd ask at this stage that you are all on mute, and just while anyone is speaking. Once we come into the discussion phase, we will bring you into the conversation. If you have a question, more than happy for you to jump off mute and ask that question. If you've got a question or a comment, please pop it into the chat bar while people are speaking, or once we move into the discussion, either pop the question in, or if you want to put a star in, then that will let us know that you have a question that you want to ask verbally, and we'll bring you into the conversation. And also, if you agree with a comment or something that someone is saying, then please do feel free to pop a plus into the chat bar as well, because sometimes it's good to be able to kind of give that feedback if someone's speaking to I guess, corroborate that you are thinking similar things. In terms of the agenda for today, we are going to talk about the delivery of YPI in 2021. I'm going to start with talking about the flexibility that's available in the programme this year. YPI does and can look a little bit different than normal, and that's okay. And I want to give you a little bit of an indication of the breadth of flexibility that is available. We're going to have some reflections, as I mentioned, from Wendy from Dingwall Academy, who led a very successful set of submissions into our Your Community Fund process last lockdown, which feels not that long ago, but it was last May, June time. And then we will very quickly kind of open up the floor to discussion. And really today, this session is about you asking questions and getting answers to any sort of queries, concerns that you may have from peers on the call and from us as well. So this is very much your session. And so therefore I'm going to kind of keep my input as brief as possible at the beginning. I wanted to start with a bit of a sort of an acknowledgement of the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations campaign, #NeverMoreNeeded. Some of you might have seen this on social media. They have talked a lot about how the volunteering sector in Scotland, or the voluntary sector in Scotland, has never been more needed, and it's also never been more stretched. And a lot of that has informed our strategy around YPI and working as hard as we possibly can to support you with the continuity of YPI this year. There's a couple of main drivers in terms of our commitment to this process. One is that there is a grant allocated to each of your schools, and this year we are incredibly committed to making sure that that grant reaches a local charity. What that looks like is very flexible, and there's a lot of opportunity for bespoke solutions given the difficult circumstances that we find ourselves in. But that is ultimately the commitment that we have made, is to ensure that every YPI grant can reach a local charity. And the second element of that is that it feels like it's never been more needed to empower youth voice in this whole process. Young people have had a lot of opportunities, I guess, taken away from them, as we all have in the last while. And YPI feels like a continued opportunity for them to be able to speak up about issues that they feel particularly passionate about. So I guess we are perhaps adopting the hashtag a little bit, #NeverMoreNeeded, because we feel, and I know that many of you feel the same, that YPI and the empowerment of youth voice and the direction of grants into local charities has never been more needed. So today I hope that we can look to work with you all to demonstrate the flexibility of YPI this year and allay any concerns that you might have about this journey, and really look to kind of find bespoke solutions for each of your individual settings. So in terms of the process of YPI, many of you will have seen our YPI Adapts 2021 paper. If you haven't seen that, it did go out to all of our schools last week. If that hasn't made its way to you, perhaps Carolyn or Lindsay could share that into the chat box, a link into the chat box at the moment. But really, what we have outlined within that paper is just the opportunity to really streamline YPI for this academic year and really focus on the key milestones of the programme in its simplest form. These remain understanding social issues and the local community that surrounds young people who are working on YPI, understanding the third sector and exploring a local charity that impacts upon a social issue, researching that charity, understanding a little bit more about the work that they do, and then creating some sort of product and business case allows young people to showcase the work that they've done. Now, many of you will have had very ambitious, very large-scale YPI programs in the past with great celebratory launches and fantastic high-impact finals. Of course, the ambition remains this year, if that feels possible and doable, that can remain, and we're not for a second wanting to dilute ambition in any way. But we are keen that this feels like a manageable process, and therefore I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of elements of the programme that we feel you can simplify and streamline, particularly to get underway or to continue with things in an online environment. So talking specifically about the launch for the moment, we have a student launch video, and we have an accompanying PowerPoint and guidance notes for that. And in terms of being able to deliver that online, all of the material is there for you to be able to upload that either as an independent student task for young people to watch that video, perhaps look at a narrated PowerPoint, and to complete some tasks themselves independently, or equally, we had a school who had a kind of a live class last week, and they were able to kind of go through that as a live class in that process. So the launch really does lend itself very well to being in an online environment. There is an opportunity to kind of add in additional inputs in there, whether you can get some feedback from senior leadership, from alumni, or from previous winning charities. But again, that's not essential, and the simplification of that process is watching the launch video and then reflecting on what that means and really introducing the process to young people that they will be going through. In terms of delivery, we're going to come on in a minute to talk a bit more about the practicalities of the different milestones of delivery, and I'm going to let Wendy give her input before we discuss that a bit further. But in terms of a YPI final, again, the final showcase, some of you may be sitting there thinking, how can we do that online, or how can we do that when we don't have young people in a hall able to give live presentations? The good news is that in the first 6 months of this year, we've had 20 very successful YPI finals that have taken place, and they've been progressed in a real variety of formats. So we've had some live finals that have taken place in an assembly hall with kind of a very limited or no audience and a small internal judging panel. And we've also had some events where pre-recorded either videos or submissions have been viewed online by a virtual judging panel in a very sort of straightforward way on a Teams call or a Google Meet call. Those pre-recorded presentations, those, I guess, creative products, whatever they might be, it doesn't have to be a video. Those are all options in terms of that format for your final. So please don't be defeated by the idea that you can't currently undertake an event in school with external visitors. That isn't a requirement at all this year, and we do have quite a number of schools who've successfully progressed alternative models. The only caveat really is that your regional facilitator or a member of the Wood Foundation team does need to be involved in the judging deliberation process as an independent adjudicator, but we can come on to talk a little bit more about the logistics of that. There are no problems with your process being judged by internal judges, and all of these adjustments are, rather than, I guess, earlier in the year, we were talking about these as ideas. We now have sort of proven I guess, evidence that these formats can work really successfully and still have a really great impact. So those are a couple of elements of the process, but really, again, just wanted to very much emphasize that all the different stages of the programme can be flexibly adapted. A final example is that third sector engagement, again, doesn't have to take place in person. And if you have concerns, natural concerns about young people engaging with external organisations online, if you have concerns about young people Engaging with external organisations while they're at home and not in a supervised school environment, again, that can be tailored to be email-only contact, or it can be tailored to be desk-based research rather than specific contact with organisations. Consideration can be given to kind of virtual or non-contact charity research, and that is okay as well in terms of the confines of the flexibility rather that's available within the programme this year. So those are kind of 3 elements of the process that I wanted to just give a brief flavour of how those can be adapted. But on a larger scale, it's important for us to kind of make you aware as schools that there is flexibility beyond that. So the group of young people that you choose to take part in YPI this year doesn't necessarily have to be the group of young people that ordinarily take part. You will know best within your school who could benefit from this opportunity at this stage. And in terms of progressing delivery, certainly sooner rather than later, and getting underway online is certainly something that we can support you with. So I guess place and fit and flexibility around that. Please know that you have the ultimate flexibility within that, and that myself or the other members of our central team and the members of our regional facilitator team will all be more than happy to work with you on that flexibility, on what online delivery could look like, or what a blended model could look like in terms of perhaps starting the process online and completing in person could look like. I noticed that some of you as well within the chat have started the process and are perhaps looking to pivot the way that you finish it in comparison to what was planned. And again, all of that support and flexibility is there. And so please do have those conversations with us to look at how you can amend the process. That is kind of what I would most strongly encourage is kind of conversations on the back of this session around bespoke models and options, because whatever happens, there will be a way that we can support you to culminate in giving a school a grant, giving a charity a grant this year. So that's all from me in terms of an introduction. I'm now keen to ask Wendy, and I know Wendy's got some slides to support her input. I'm keen to ask Wendy to contribute. And the reason that we asked Wendy to speak with you all today is that we had a really large number of schools who were able to pivot last year and participate in our Year Community Fund project. Now, I know that some of you will have a closer awareness on Year Community Fund than others. So just by way of context, when lockdown was announced and schools closed last year, we had around about half of our schools who hadn't been able to complete their YPI programme, which meant that there was quite a significant underspend in terms of the grants that went out to schools, and we were very keen to be able to kind of direct that money to local charities. And so as a result, we very quickly pivoted and set up Your Community Fund. Something that I would like to emphasise is that this year there's no intention to set up a Your Community Fund Mark II. The purpose of this webinar and all of our conversations with you are to support the delivery of YPI, albeit a flexible, a tailored version of YPI, but within that, the sort of the features of YPI will remain. Your Community Fund was slightly different in that we asked young people to collaborate virtually to create a creative product. It didn't have to be a live presentation, and we asked them to submit those creative products in order to and to create a business case as to why their charity should win a grant. So very similar to YPI. The size of the grant was slightly different. So you may well hear Wendy referring to a £4,000 grant as opposed to a £3,000 grant. And so some of the parameters for YCF were slightly different for those that we're going to be asking you to continue to adhere to as part of YPI. However, the milestones of the Year Community Fund process and the principles and the outcomes are very similar. So we really felt that Wendy would be able to share a good insight into how she delivered the Year Community Fund project over a very short time scale. I'm going to say about 5 weeks last year with a group of her students. And so I'm going to pass over to Wendy at this point. I don't want to steal any more of your thunder, Wendy, in terms of what you might say. So if you'd like to kick off, that would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so we, as Dingwall Academy, we've been taking part in YPI for the last 6 years. Just to give you an overview of what we usually do. So we always run the project with S3, and we start in April and it goes through into May with our finals at the very, very end of May. It's run through the PSE and the English department, mostly the English department. We have a big charity fair quite close to the beginning of the project, which is quite a big event. Our English classes are collapsed and people attend English in house groups. We have semi-finals within the English department, and then our final is a big event in the evening where we invite parents and pupils and ex-winners and the charities and members of the local community. So it's very well established in the school. It's been running really well for a number of years, and yeah, we do make a big fuss of it. Last year, lockdown started just before we were about to introduce the whole concept to the S3 pupils. And so of course everything was up in the air and we didn't know what was going to happen with YPI. But as soon as we heard about the Your Community Fund and what was on offer, we were very, very, very keen to take part in it, especially knowing that just how much pressure the local charities were under, and the fact that there was a £4,000 grant or perhaps more available for our local charities. So we quickly decided that we were going to run it in a very similar format to what we would do if we were in school. We were very lucky in that our pupils have had Chromebooks for the last 3 years. So we've been using Google Apps for Education for the last 3 years. So we're all quite experienced with Google Classroom and so on. So we're feeling quite confident about using that platform to deliver it. And that's what we did. We did deliver it to the whole of S3. PSE had some input at the beginning, but it was mostly the English teachers who ran the project and who managed the different YPI classes. I'll come back to some of these little bits later, but we had a big online launch. The English classes were collapsed as usual, and we set up a YPI Google Classroom for each house class. Okay, I'm going to go skip over here. So the launch, we did the launch with the second week in May, but the week before that, we wanted to kind of pique the pupils' interests and get them a bit intrigued about the project. So we actually did a kind of Your Community project where there were some slides about what is philanthropy, and there was a quiz for them to do at home with their parents, which was actually really quite popular. And we had people emailing asking for the answers well before we were ready to give them. So that happened the week before. And then the following week, we shared the launch video. So that's me down in the corner there. You can see from my conservatory. I did a video just talking about what I usually would do in the assembly, talking about what YPI is, about the school's successful history with it, and about why it was so important for them to embrace this opportunity, especially given everything that we were going through at that time. And I also shared the answers to the quiz at that point. So that was launched with absolutely everyone. And then at that point, all the pupils were in their different Google Classrooms and in contact with their teachers, and they took part in the project with their teachers. I was kind of coordinating it, having an overview of it, but there was a class teacher allocated to each group of pupils, about 30 pupils in each group. So the structure, it ran over a 4-week period. Week 1 was all about researching the issues and picking a charity. And we came up with some Google Doc assignments for them to be able to work through and to submit, so that teachers could have an overview of what was going on. Week 2 and week 3 were all about creativity and the presentation. Now, I'm just going to come out here for a wee second and show you the Google Classroom. Oh, here we go. So this is the Google Classroom down here. Go down to the bottom. So we set assignments on the classroom down here. So I'm happy to share any of these materials at all. I don't know if I can do that centrally, Alex, or if anyone would like to contact me to get copies of any of this, and that's absolutely fine. So the first assignment was this one here, which is YPI Local Issues and Charities, and it was a task for them to work on individually, getting them to explore what the local issues were, what charities were dealing with these issues, and then starting to think about what particular social issue in the time of the pandemic they would like to focus on and pick a charity that was involved with. 2 seconds. Yeah, and then as I said, so at that point they got into their groups. The groups had been identified by the PSC teachers and were put together in those. They were in their groups, and we set up hangouts for each of the groups so they could meet live or they could just message each other. And we found that hangouts in Google Classroom and Google Apps was probably the best way for them to communicate. And also it meant that the teacher could be in the hangout as well. We did have a couple of teething issues with that, but they were sorted out fairly quickly. And we had the YPI buddies in there as well, which I'll come to in a wee second. So creativity and the presentation, we did a lot of work on this. We wanted the pupils to come up with something quite special if they possibly could. And 2 of our English teachers, they put together an absolutely wonderful document. I should have shown you that as well. That gave pupils step-by-step instructions on doing different things like creating info. Here we go. And using some of the different websites like WeVideo if they were going to do some kind of video, about using Google Slides, about making infographics, about making podcasts. So there's a big document here, and basically once the pupils had decided what creative product they wanted to do, then they could go to whatever section here was relevant, and they could get some in-depth advice on how to actually approach that. So that was a really, really useful document. I'm happy to share that with anyone if you'd like to see that. Okay, and then the class teachers themselves, we didn't have a big finals last year, but the class teachers themselves, they were responsible for identifying any groups that they thought presentations were particularly strong, and they came through to the final judging panel, which consisted of myself and some other members of the school community, and last year's winners as well, who were really, really keen to get involved. And once we had those finalists, we narrowed that down to 3, and that was the 3 that we submitted to the final judging panel at YPI. And we were lucky enough that we actually won 2 £4,000 grants in the end, which was really, really wonderful. YPI buddies, so we were very aware that we had lots and lots of enthusiastic ex-YPI participants in the school. So I put a notice out in our school communication classroom saying if any ex-YPI participants wanted to get involved with this year's project and act as buddies with the current groups, then could they get in contact? And we actually had a huge response to it. So we were able to allocate a couple of buddies to each class once they would kind of narrow down what the duties were going to be. And they were a really big support for the different groups. If anyone was struggling in particular, or if we identified a group who just weren't really engaging with the project at all, then a peer from an older year group was able to get in contact with them and to support them. So that was a really nice touch, and they really enjoyed doing that. We tried to get as much publicity around it, so we just tried to hype it up as much as possible, given that we weren't able to be in the school and do our assemblies and so on. So our local paper, the Rossshire Journal, they ran a series of articles throughout the project. So right at the beginning, and they linked it to online learning. They did a big celebration of the 2 £4,000 grants as well that we won in the end. And then we had quite a lot of Facebook activity around that too. As I said, 2 of our groups won £4,000 for the charity. We shared the presentations with the whole school on the different year group sites, and we did a live presentation of them as well. But we had a big online prize giving event in the school, which was really, really lovely. And one of the showcases in that was to show the two videos that won the £4,000 for their charities as well. And as I said, we managed to get quite a bit of local press coverage too. In terms of problems, last year we discouraged pupils from contacting charities. We were aware that people were under an awful lot of pressure. So in terms of charities answering emails or answering phone calls, we did discourage that, and we definitely missed that charity contact. I mean, every single year when we do YPI, it's one of the really lovely things that there are those relationships that form, and I think that was lacking a wee bit last year, but that's what it was. Engagement on the whole was good, but it was patchy. But to be honest, not all pupils always engage with YPI anyway, so I don't know if that was, I wouldn't say it was a particular issue last year. And the quality of the presentations was of course variable, but I think that happens every year as well. So I mean, really the project was really successful. Specific problems to it being online, I would say, was the missed charity and the fact that we missed the contact with charities. And then finally, I was speaking to Alex yesterday because we were talking about today, but she was asking what we're planning for this year. So we don't know exactly when we're going to do it this year, but we're definitely taking part this year. But in our talks recently, we've come to the conclusion that we think we'd rather do it online this year than actually be in school under COVID restrictions and doing it. When we're thinking about how we're going to coordinate it and how we'd have people working in groups in school if we still had the if we still had quite a lot of restrictions in the movement around the school, we actually think it'd be more straightforward just to follow a very similar process to what we did last year with the YPI project, rather than trying to coordinate it in school but have an awful lot of restrictions on movement and so on. But we're just in the we're deciding what we're going to do at the moment, and we're hoping to deliver it to the whole year group again, but we're very appreciative of having the option to do the select group if that's what's going to be more manageable for the teachers. So I realized I zipped through there and I saw there was quite a lot of, I'm going to stop sharing my screen just now. I can come back to anything. I noticed there were some chat bits coming up. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, so Alex said we can share the material centrally as a follow-up to the session. Yes, no problem at all. And Hangouts on Google app, yes. So yeah, it's the kind of chat function. We did have it switched off during the year, but when we're in online learning, we tend to have it switched on because it's really quite valuable. Yes, creative product document, no problem, I can share that. Yes, yep.
And then Lindsay has shared that we've also got some kind of creative guidance within our new delivery resource as well. So I think the combination of both of those documents will hopefully give lots of people bits and bobs of ideas around creativity. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to stop the recording, because what would be really lovely is I appreciate that maybe not everybody wants to have their face on camera, but I'm going to just stop the recording because I think that will be really valuable to share with others. And I just like us to be able to have like a really open discussion at this point.